contact information, make sure you have your full name. I see some people put their initials. You really want to have your name. Why? Well, if your resume is sitting in a database, and let's say I come across you on LinkedIn, or I want to try to find you in our system, if you don't spell out your name, I'm not going to be able to find you. So I don't know why people do that, but make sure you put your name, your full name. A lot of people have a question mark on the address. You have privacy things going on these days. You have stalkers, crazy people out there. You really don't need to include your street address, but I do think it's important to list out at least your city, state, and your zip code. Now, if you're coming out of school, or if you're wide open to relocation, you could kind of make an argument that you don't want to be tied down to any one place. You'll have to use your best judgment there. The way the applicant tracking systems work, though, when they parse your resume digitally, they're going to be looking for that zip code and then the city and the state. And if I'm a recruiter looking for somebody locally, and I want to try to find somebody, and I'm in a big city like Atlanta, where I used to live, a lot of people don't want to cross over and commute from one side to the other. So, a lot of times you'll search by zip code, and if you don't have your zip code in there, you are invisible to me. So just bear that in mind. If you're in Atlanta or you're trying to apply there, you're probably going to want to have an Atlanta zip code. That way you can be found in a search. So that's why it's important to list that information. And let's say you're open to 2 or 3 cities. Let's say maybe you have a friend in each of those cities. It's okay to borrow their address, because it's better to have some kind of a city and zip code than to not have one. And again, unless you're wide open to the United States, you want to put something in there. Obviously, we talked about personal email, personal phone number. Ideally, your cell phone is best. If you've got your LinkedIn profile updated, and you really should these days, you want to put that URL up there as well. Some other things you may want to include if you have a blog. Let's say you're a college student where you're getting ready to graduate. You've got a current address. You may have a future place you want to live. So in some cases, I know that's how I did it in school. Many years ago, I had both my student address and as well as my permanent address. So it's okay to have 2 in that type of a situation. There's a copy of my resume. I had it professionally rewritten years ago. Really big fan of this format. It's easy to scan. It checks that box. It kind of showcases what I'm about. In terms of supply chain search, talent acquisition. I've got a skills summary in there. It's not a bullet format, but I've got some vertical lines in there to separate those skills, and it makes it easy to scan. And then I've bolded, underline things so you can quickly get through it. But you want to make sure you've got the skills, and when it comes to keywords, you're using the most popular keywords. We'll talk about how do you figure that out. What are the most searched keywords? What do people use to describe what I do for a living? There are research tools out there to help you with that. Make sure you deliver, you showcase that all important value that you've delivered for your employer. You want to back those up with quantified accomplishments or metrics. And then, fill it in with associations. Obviously, I'm a member of ASCM, formerly APIX, CSCMP, ISM, and some other associations. So make sure you list those out as well, especially if you have certifications. I will tell you, it is quite common for employers to prefer certain certifications that align with the kind of role they're looking to fill. And us recruiters, we search on those very frequently. So if you have them, make sure you list those as well. And then you see, I've kind of got I would call it more of a power branding statement up there at the very top. That's going to get their attention. It's up there at the top. It's in the front. It's bold. I even increased the font size. So feel free to include those kind of power statements, as I like to call them. And now, obviously, if you're customizing around the type of search, you can, for example, the skills and competencies. You can see I've got talent acquisition, retained search, contingent, sourcing, so forth. You can rearrange and prioritize those skills and competencies around the type of search, around the type of position you're applying to as well. So in some cases, it might even make sense to have, 2 or 3 different resumes that you have where you're adjusting. That way you don't have to make as many adjustments, and you're not I've seen people have like 15, 20 iterations of their resume. You're coming out of school, it's a different, I'm gonna talk about that. It's different. You're going to want to emphasize that education. So you're showing that employer, hey, I'm going to be wrapping up college here and I'm going to be ready to start my career. And even if you go back and get your master's, secondary education, sometimes you want to pull that back up top. Because if you don't, employers may look and say, oh, wow, this person took a 2 years off. So I think it's always important to showcase education up top. And then when you get that position, then you can pull it down to the bottom of the resume. A lot of folks ask, do I include my GPA? I would say if it's favorable, usually favorable. Some folks will argue 3.0 and above is favorable. So include that if you feel like it would help. Any kind of other certifications, there's things like Lean certified. You've got different flavors of Six Sigma, green belt, yellow belt, black belt, and so forth, master black belt. Any kind of training, development, awards, you definitely want to showcase that. Coming out of school, super important to have those internships and follow the same recipe here, where you don't just state the job task, put in those accomplishments as well. And when you start an internship, some people don't think about it until they're told where are your accomplishments. So just bear in mind, keep track of those and have those on the forethought versus the back burner, because you don't want to get caught after the fact. Oh shoot, I didn't keep track of my numbers and data, and then you're going to have to kind of estimate things, and that's not a good idea. Any other volunteer things? If you do public speaking, you're part of the Mensa Society, Toastmasters. If you can speak multiple language, you have security clearances if applicable. A lot of government positions, subcontractor roles, aerospace defense are going to require that. Volunteer experience, military experience, especially if it relates to logistics, operations, supply chain. You might even want to highlight that under your experience, especially if you're transitioning out of the military. A lot of those roles are highly transferable coming out of the military, so make sure you showcase that as well. One last tip here is keep it relevant. Employers want to know the value you deliver to your employer. Let's say you've been working 20, 25 plus years. You want to emphasize the last, let's say 5 to 10. You don't want to go back too far in time and have like 20 different bullet points on something you did 25 years ago. It's just no longer relevant. So just keep it relevant, usually the last few years, and then de-emphasize everything else. You might have 1 or 2 bullet points for some jobs you held many years ago, for example. Last, one more point. Honesty is the only policy. I have seen so many people, especially in my corporate days, I've seen people, get pulled out of interviews for stretching things. So you never want to lie. You never want to stretch the truth. Background checks there's plenty of news articles out there where even CEOs have put in some bent kind of bent the truth around their resume, and it came back and came back to haunt them, and they were let go, and that follows you forever, especially if you're at a very senior role. So those are the core elements of a resume. Back to the context we talked about earlier. If you're especially leading an operation, you want to make sure you kind of put in the basics of the type of operation, lines, employees, throughput, volume, things like that employers and recruiters want to see, so they can tell, are you managing a tiny operation, or it is a very, very large, or is it somewhere in the middle? Help them understand versus making assumptions. We want to try to mitigate as many assumptions as possible.